Just let me. Just go with it. Can't see. Just who's that? Oh yes. All right. Two other brave souls somewhere will join us shortly. Good morning. I have several things that I say over and over again. And one of them is this: what is the most important theological question? And that question is, what time is it? So it's time to just give the little friends time to settle for a moment so that they all can feel safe at home. And so we are living in, and then how does our tradition respond to what time it is? So for the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to excavate wisdom and practices from our sacred story for living with and coping in times that are becoming more sorry, I'm not putting that sentence together properly. In times of escalating violence and profound terror and instability. And as I was saying to Andy earlier, there was a time when we all had access to this on the 6 o'clock news. And now, for better or for worse, we have access 24/7. And therefore, what is it that we need, and what is the wisdom of this tradition offer us in turbulent times? And one of the things that it offers us is an invitation, as does every great spiritual tradition, yes? And the rituals in every great spiritual tradition provide a portal, a space, a silence, and very often a community with whom to sit and be still. And so one of our sacred practices is simply stopping. Stopping to breathe, stopping to see, and then in that stopping, seeking to connect with a bigger and better story. And so again, as we go into this time for focus, I share with you this piece of art based on the baptism of Jesus. And what I love about this piece of art is because I think when we think about baptism, whereas we made it a sacrament that happens, at the beginning of our life or when we make some sort of commitment as an adult, it seems to me that the world that Jesus was trying to awaken his disciples to was a world that was baptized with mystery, that was immersed in mystery. And that somehow connecting with that mystery, that world, that presence, would restore us and give us the tools and the wisdom to know what our role is in a world that is very turbulent right now. And therefore, this entrance into sacred practice is so important. This invitation to breathe, to sit, to sink, and to remember that larger sacred story that we know as we look through the rear view mirror has power, not the power of the powers that be, but has the power to come within us, beneath us, and surround us and provide us sanctuary. Not as a place for hiding necessarily, though hiding is probably not a bad thing on our nervous system right now, but a place for connecting with something better, more beautiful, more kind. And so I invite you now to enter through this portal, to seek communion with the presence that is always seeking communion with you. Let us pray. Holy One, we come as we are, a little weary, very anxious, maybe a bit scattered, and carrying the weight of the week on our shoulders and in our bones. Draw us now into the mystery of your presence and enable us to find deep rest in your stillness. Let our breath seek the rhythm of your breath, so that we might slow our racing thoughts and unclench our hands. Let our hearts rest from the noise of the world and the stories that both exhaust us and terrify us. Gather us back to ourselves and restore us to one another. Align us again with heaven and its purposes. Put your love and mercy and all gifts that support abundant life. Here we are, Holy One. We are listening. Amen. The hymn is on the screen. So I'm reading from Luke chapter 10, and it's always interesting when I look at how our sacred text is kind of set up. Keep in mind that our sacred did not come with somebody following around Jesus and getting the story. Most of the stories we know about his life were not put on paper or put on parchment until probably 60, 70 AD, and some a little later. So again, these are stories that were part of an oral tradition. And yet I always find it interesting when Luke or any of the other scribes put things in certain order. And what is interesting to me about this story is that it is followed by the story of the Good Samaritan. And so, again, I think in many ways, our sacred tradition invites us to follow a particular rhythm, which is action and then contemplation, and action and contemplation. And it's very interesting that just is a very infinity symbol, isn't it? That's the pattern. So I'll be reading to you. It's a scripture lesson I haven't thought about for a long time, and it gets people going sometimes. As they continued to travel, Jesus entered a village. A woman by the name of Martha welcomed him and made him feel quite at home. She had a sister, Mary, who sat before the master, hanging on every word he said. But Martha was pulled away by all that she had to do in the kitchen. Later, she stepped in, interrupting them. "Master, don't you care that my sister has abandoned the kitchen to me? Tell her to lend me a hand." And the master said, "Martha, dear Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken from her." So it's another one of those weeks where I actually have my message written at noon on Saturday, and then the world keeps turning, and then I return to it at night and think, maybe I need to amend this a bit. So I've got two parts, actually. One was in the original first part, and then I have some words to share from somebody that I was at a conference with several years ago. This week, we will excavate another sacred practice for turbulent times. The story that Luke tells of Jesus in the home of his friends, sisters Mary and Martha, who also have a brother named Lazarus, has launched many times over the years the role of women in the church. And keep in mind that then for many, many years, women were kind of put in particular roles in churches. And so, where am I back to? Right, so it turns out that over the years, there have been groups of women in churches that are called Martha groups, all right? So the Martha group in a church is the group of women who are committed to service and hospitality and goodness knows what, and have over the centuries been the backbone of Christian communities and outreach ministries. But this is a hard one, this story about Mary and Martha, because in fact, it's not meant to reinforce the role of women in the kitchen. Now, of course, we need to remember that hospitality was profoundly important cultural practice in the Middle East, and it was a particularly important sacred practice in the early communities of Jesus followers. It's quite likely that the home of Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus was also a gathering place for those who came together around the wisdom of Jesus. So Martha's practice of hospitality was in keeping with both cultural and religious practices, and her sister's behavior was not in keeping with cultural and religious practices. And so Mary complains to Jesus, "I'm slaving away here in the kitchen. Can you send my sister to help me?" Jesus, in response, speaks tenderly to his friend. Martha, you are so anxious and it's not necessary. Mary, sitting at my feet, being a disciple, a student of the sacred wisdom, she has chosen well. So anyone who has ever found themselves alone in the kitchen without enough help might have a tendency at this point to think, just like a man, not to understand how hard I'm working to serve here. But Jesus is not praising one activity over the other. He is pointing out that Martha is worked up and anxious, and that her busyness and then her further resentment of her sister may not, in fact, be faithfulness, but anxiety. I can relate to this. I can relate to being driven by responsibilities, to serve, to overhelp, because I want to make things better, all a worthy cause. And in turbulent times, we need to do things, good things. But we also need to stop and wonder, where has this addiction to doing landed in our culture? This anxious striving and planning and plotting and achieving. And we've got a new phrase to describe this drivenness. It's called hustle culture. And hustle culture demands production. And yet I wonder what it's doing to people in the workplace right now, what it's doing to people in the early 20s looking to determine where they're going to fit in this rat race, and what it's doing to our children. And so a work ethic, being the responsible one, a full agenda feels virtuous in this culture. But I wonder, again, looking at this image of Martha and Mary as archetypes, at what point do we sit and wonder about the byproduct of a culture that's addicted to productivity? And at the same time, what have we been avoiding in this overdoing culture? Are there realities that we've been trying to keep at bay with our busyness? Is our busyness an antidote to loneliness, maybe? Or grief? Or hopelessness? Jesus suggests that Mary, sitting on the ground at his feet, has chosen what is most important in that moment. She has chosen stillness, listening, attending to a deeper sacred wisdom. I think in our culture in this season on the planet, it may not be about being busy or not being busy. It's really about knowing when to stop and when to make room for wisdom that serves as an antidote to our anxiety and our fear. Mary is not being passive or lazy. She is choosing something radical for a woman in her day. She is choosing discipleship. She stays. She listens. She will not be distracted by her sister's anxiety from this food that she is being fed. She stops at this moment. She will not be a servant or a helper or a fixer, all noble endeavors. But Mary chooses the nourishment of the Jesus wisdom. Mary chooses to be present, to be with her teacher. She will not be driven by cultural expectations or an urgency to do something. In this place, she will learn again about what is most important. She will align herself again with another way of thinking and musing and functioning in a turbulent world. she has taken this space to attend to the deepest wisdom for the purpose of sustaining her life. She is making herself available to receive the gifts that will restore her body, mind, and soul. Jesus does not scold Martha for her choice, but observes what happens when we are driven to fix, to help, to serve, to achieve, and never take the time to sit, to wonder, to consider what it is that will contribute to our healing, our restoration, and the healing and the restoration of the planet. Jesus said in turbulent times, and it was about to get much worse, that his friend and disciple Mary has chosen the one thing that is essential that cannot be taken from her. And so I really wonder, what is it that cannot be taken from us in times such as these? Because God knows these times have robbed us of many things. Peace of mind being just one of them. Well, if Martha is busy and anxious, Mary is still and has found peace in communion with the sacred. Has found peace in this presence, in the person of Jesus, and it will fuel her as she continues her journey in a very turbulent world. So again, this story serves as a portal for daily practice, and I know that many of you begin your day with a time of sitting still, listening, maybe journaling, maybe doing some art, maybe reading from a devotional book. Many of you take time out for receiving, not doing. And you do this because you know how powerfully the sitting still and receiving will inform your well-being for the rest of the day. I'm going to suggest that perhaps looking at why we may avoid doing some of the sitting and watching and waiting. Maybe we avoid those moments for stillness and receiving wisdom from our own heart. Maybe there's wisdom that we're afraid of receiving. Maybe there are things that we're afraid of knowing. Afraid of maybe admitting that something is terribly wrong. Maybe afraid of facing our own grief and hopelessness. And yet maybe these fears that we do not want to face, in fact, are preventing us from a deeper encounter with the presence of love, with a wisdom that wants to hold us with tenderness and that wants to provide rest for our souls, that we might be better able to face our own reality. So I'm sharing some wisdom now, part 2, from a friend of mine. That's in keeping with this action, contemplation, doing, receiving, listening. Last week, Renee Good. This week, Alex Jeffrey Preddy. We've been taught in recent years that if we are not shouting, striking, or escalating, we are somehow complicit. that silence is violence, a slogan born from a genuine desire to encourage people not to stay quiet out of fear or apathy, but like most slogans, it flattened a nuanced truth into something too simple to hold the whole picture. Silence born of avoidance, fear, or indifference can absolutely allow harm to continue, but silence itself is not violence. Silence is also where reflection lives and where conscience forms. It is where we hear the quiet voice of our hearts, of our God, before we decide how to act in the world. Without that kind of silence, action easily becomes reactivity and noise masquerades as moral clarity. This moment asks for something far harder than outrage and more mature than constant escalation. It asks for the kind of inner stillness that allows us to respond rather than react, to speak when it is true to speak, and to hold silence when that is the wiser path. This is not a rejection of courage, but a refinement of it, because sometimes the bravest thing is not to shout first, but to listen long enough to know what is actually worth saying. We are being asked to keep our hearts open while the ground shakes beneath us, to witness atrocity without surrendering our hearts to hatred, to help where we can, speak where it matters, act where action is ours to take, and resist the seduction of lashing out simply to discharge fear. Doing nothing is not what is required here. What's needed is steadiness. We must tend, as Mary did, our own coherence and care for real people in our actual reach. The light does not advance by charging into the dark with clenched fists. It advances by staying lit. We can't destroy the dark by extinguishing our own light. That only ever spreads the darkness. That is what brought us here. It will not carry us forward. The initiation of our age is not to prove how furious we are, but to prove we can stay human when fury would be easier. Seeking silence, seeking time with that presence, that mystery whom we have called God, is not cowardice. And sacred stillness is not apathy. Not when we do so in pursuit of the wisdom of the heart. History is loud right now, but the future is being built on those who refuse to let the dying world harden them. Be one of those people. That is more than enough. During this time for contemplation, let us maybe invoke our body a bit, and perhaps we can just hold our hands in a posture of openness, knowing that we've all gathered here without the answers. We've all gathered here riddled with anxiety, and we've all gathered here with hearts broken for a world that we see breaking before our eyes. Let us receive. Why don't you remain seated for this next hymn? So a reminder that listening to the land, an immersive experience marking the Celtic Festival of Imbolc, is next Sunday afternoon. And this is the second year in a row that I've hosted an event for Imbolc, which is also St. Bridget's Day, which is the cross-quarter Celtic festival between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And within the Celtic Wheel of the Year, in the UK, for example, that marked the first day of spring. For the rest of us who are still under winter snow, it's a time to begin to consider what might be bubbling, what might be emerging. And again, wisdom learned from the land, featuring the most astounding photography by Jason Pettit. That will be accompanied by an original piece written to go with that photography. A few other things of what's upcoming. Next week, so we start another different series of conversations. So this last 3 weeks has been personal sacred practices that you don't need to have an appointment for, or even a person available to you, or part of necessarily a community. It's those practices of stopping and listening, or stopping and turning our attention to something else, things that we can do just in our own bodies in those moments when we maybe be gripped with fear. So it went like this. So every once in a while, Robin Riley shares wisdom with you, and he came up to me, I guess, in November, and he said, so here's what I've been thinking about, Lynn. He goes, within our sacred text, you have that archetype of the shepherd, and in fact, you had communities of shepherds, and very often these the shepherding practice, the caring for practice, was used an example of how we're called to care for communities, et cetera. And he goes, but what do we do with that shepherd archetype in a world where there are no common grazing grounds? So he said that was a world when there were common grounds, common grazing grounds. And now we live in a world that's driven by the acquisition of private property. So I then spent some time listening to Robin talk about it and went, oh, wow. That's really fascinating. What does our sacred wisdom have to say about that? Because it comes out of a very different world. Anyway, so we're going to be gathering in a circle next week because there will be some music for reflection and contemplation. But Robin would like also to be engaged. There's going to be a Q&A. These are big, big conversations, and we're going to have them together as a community.